right, welcome to Story Conversations. I'm Stephen.
And I'm Travis.
We are the founding pastors of Story Church, and we are here to answer your questions about the sermon and God's Word. Travis, how you doing?
I'm drinking really hot tea. I'm good. How are you? That was horrible timing. I knew that was coming, and I just was like, hot tea
If
in my
only
mouth.
we started with the question every week.
Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm rested. My daughter has slept through the night, my
Great.
6-month-old, for the first time ever.
Love
so
it.
That's great. All right, here is the opening question for today. You can answer this two ways. What is something that was like your favorite thing you remember doing as a kid? You know, sport, activity, or whatever, or just something that like brings you a lot of nostalgia when you think back on your childhood of like, oh man, I miss those days kind of thing.
Yeah. Our family vacationed really well. And the big plus to vacationing when you're a child is that you don't pay for anything. And now vacationing as an adult is so tough because I pay for it. But my parents made sure that we were able to see the world and be exposed to a lot of different cultures and places and things. And so I really enjoyed how they made priority for that, which meant we said no to a lot of other things, different activities and sports and ways to spend our money, their money. But the two in particular that I remember that were really fun, we went with some friends to kind of South Carolina, Georgia, North Carolina, all throughout the Southeast. And so that was a win for my dad because he's a big golfer. And then we were able to do, Savannah and the coast of Carolina. Warm water blew my mind as a young kid. And then good Southern food. We went to a Braves game, did all those things. And then the second one would be when we went to New York City. We went shortly after 9/11, and
Wow.
it was a great trip. Great trip. I hated all the walking as a young kid back then, but I haven't been back since then. Would love to go back and see it again. So what about you?
Got blisters on my feet last time.
Blisties.
But I was there. Whew. I think mine is probably like every generation thinks they're the last ones that have like the old school experience as a kid. But sometimes I kind of feel like that's actually true, at least
With the advent of
for
the phone,
my experience.
smartphone.
Yeah. Because some of my fondest memories are just like having like a gang of kids in the neighborhood that we hung out with. And it was like, whose house are we going to? Just like walking up to someone's house and hoping they're home on the weekend or in the summer. We played a lot of like street hockey, and we had like the rich kid that had like an actual net and nice stuff, and then we had like trash cans and cardboard boxes we would stack up on top of each other for like the goal.
Yeah,
that was like with rollerblades, and
fun.
that was so much fun. So just simple stuff like that, doing that, throwing a baseball and hoping we don't break a window, and running when the car comes through the street, and laser tag, and just like being outside. Like we didn't have a computer. Yeah. My family was really late to the game with tech. And so much of I loved playing like video games and reading books and stuff like that as a kid, but just so many good memories of just like being outside and kind of like, what's today hold? Like, what fire are we going to start and then have to put out?
Yep.
Somewhere, because we're just like boys hanging out, having fun, exploring and whatnot. And I just loved that. And it was cool. We had like a kid from India whose parents had moved, and his dad like owned a bunch of local businesses, and like all these different kids, different cultures growing up in the Bay Area. And it was just like really cool and really fun experience doing that. So I miss those days. I hope that my girls, we try to do that now. Like you try to like get them in the backyard, go to the park, like spend, and this isn't a criticism of screen time or like a, pastoral rebuke, but like I want to avoid it as much as possible for various reasons and the toxicity that it will bring long term to be dependent on those things. But just I want them to be excited about and used to spending time with other people, other kids, and just being like outside going like, what is there to do? And like creative fun that comes with that and whatnot. So because I loved that, and I hope that's something we can perpetuate in our family.
Yeah, that's my brother and then a girl Danielle up the street. They were the oldest in the neighborhood amongst all the friends and stuff. So they were the ringleaders of everything. And one year we were playing like Christmas, and of course Brandon was Santa Claus, and I was just like a lowly reindeer.
Oh, not even an elf.
No, heck no. That's way too lofty of a position for a guy like me.
Brandon wouldn't let that happen.
Never. So those are all such fond memories. That's a good callback right there.
Man, a little nostalgia trip there. All right, well, let's jump into some questions. First one, this is from the question is: a Story Church kid asks, "Why do people get baptized, Pastor Travis?"
Oh man, that's a great question. I think there's certainly precedent in Scripture of obviously Jesus got baptized, and we're to follow after the pattern of Jesus. Not only that, but Jesus commands us to get baptized after salvation. And then beyond just the, because I told you so, which should be reason enough for Christians to obey the commands of Jesus. But I also believe there's a symbol and a means of grace when it comes to baptism. It is a symbol, but it's not just a symbol. It's a symbol that shows the change of heart, the repentance, the new life we have. We've been buried with him in baptism and raised with him out of the waters to new life. But it's also a means of grace for the person being baptized and the rest of the congregation. We're commanded to remember our baptism. And so it's a welcoming into the covenant community of faith, whether or not, there's membership implications there. But it is a welcoming someone into the kingdom, into the faith, and it builds up the body. Our hearts are changed and encouraged and all of those things. And so if you're a believer and you're not yet baptized, would highly encourage you wrestle with that and come to our upcoming baptism class. What would you add to that?
Yeah. One of my favorite aspects of baptism and just experiencing other people's baptisms at Story Church, and especially, but like I got to baptize my wife years ago, and the practice of which was not something I grew up with, but something we do and I've seen done well, is having people share their testimonies, so that it's not just the theological meaning of baptism, the obedience and the symbol that it recognizes and that it represents, and all of the different things that we believe there, but it's also like getting to celebrate God saving people in a public way. Like the public profession of faith part of it for me is like, it gets me emotional every time we do it. It gets me excited. It's like this is why we do this. This is why the church exists. This is why God doesn't just say, well, we got the Christians on the earth as they are. Let's just kind of end this thing and let's move on with the new heavens and new earth. Like totally. It gets me so stoked. And so being able to do that for my wife, but seeing like kids do that and be like brave to either read their testimony or have a video submitted, as we've done for some who are maybe a little more nervous, and like just getting to see that and going, wow, like God did this. Like it's meaningful for us and powerful for the individual, but it's also just this like just beautiful way of glorifying and honoring God and being wowed at who God is and what he does. And it's my favorite thing when someone has come to our church and baptism is a part of that, whether they came to faith at our church or shortly before, or they just feel compelled to obey God in baptism, and we get to be a part of that and and whatnot. And so I think I totally, obviously all the stuff you said, totally agree with that, but that's the thing that sticks out to me the most is just it's worth it because of what it's worth doing, just to say, if anyone's maybe hesitant to get baptized or nervous about it or feels like, oh, this is awkward, like it's an opportunity to invite people who aren't believers, oftentimes happens at our church, to come, because it's a momentous thing, and in the world people get that, even if they don't understand what it means. People will come to watch, and it's an evangelistic opportunity there, but it's just an amazing way to humble ourselves and say God did all of this, and it's a very humble thing to do, have someone dip you below the water and lift you up, and you're kind of just dependent on them. You're just experiencing it and you're not contributing anything to it. Like it's a good like reminder and picture of that experience of God saving us and taking us from death to life. But yeah, like what a way for us to, as a church, to celebrate the ultimate thing that God's done for us, and not only fix our eyes on circumstantial things, but to see that big eternal reality of salvation displayed in that way. Oh man, it gets me so excited every time. Favorite services we ever do, way more than Easter or Christmas Eve ever could be. Yeah,
I think also it's important to remember when it comes to baptism that it neither saves you nor is it necessary for salvation. And so what I mean by that is the baptism itself does not save you. It shows that you have been saved. We believe and affirm the position that baptism is credo baptism, so post confession of faith, and it's not necessary for salvation either. Meaning the man on the cross who calls Jesus Lord, and Jesus says, "Today you'll be with me in paradise." That man was not baptized, and he was still saved. Now, that being said, that is not a reason to delay or refuse to be baptized. There's really, in the New Testament, there's no category for an unbaptized believer or a believer without a church home and family. Mm-hmm. Those are the two kind of categories that the New Testament doesn't even give gray area on. Yeah. So, like, many will delay baptism and they'll say, well, it's not necessary for salvation. But the reason why they're actually delaying, sometimes it's fear. Yeah. Like, I don't want to, give a public testimony, or it's apathy or laziness. In some cases, now there are reasons at time to delay baptism. Like Katie and I, we believe Peyton is a believer. Like she's made that confession. She has shown fruit in keeping with it. But our personal conviction right now, just our conviction, is we're going to wait. We're going to wait. We want some time. We want her to be a part of making that decision, and we want her to be able to remember it when she gets older. Katie would be okay with me sharing this. She got baptized at, I think, 6 years old. And there's times where she has wondered, was I a believer or not? Mm-hmm. And what did I have a say in that decision? Mm-hmm. Do I remember it, and those kind of things? Now,
same.
And that's a good wrestle to go through. So for us personally, our conviction is we're gonna just delay on this. But if your delay in being baptized is you saying it's not necessary for salvation, I would just say that's the wrong posture of heart before God. He commands us to get baptized. Mm-hmm. Now I know that's a little bit of a tangent, but I think it's important to talk about those things, and just like baptism is really important. It's not the end of your discipleship to Jesus. For most, it's the beginning of your discipleship to Jesus.
That's good. Yeah, and to the adults, but especially to kids and teens, like we want to celebrate if God has changed your life, if you've given your life to Him. Like we want to celebrate that with you. We want you to be able to celebrate that. We want you to be able to proclaim that to all around you, that Jesus has grabbed your heart and that you've given your life to Him and He's saved you. And it's an awesome, beautiful thing. And so we have, a baptism class, and kids are part of that process. And we invite kids to come and meet with typically with our family minister and talk about what this means with your parents. And so, if this question's coming from a place of interest in that, or whether, parents listening, or if there's kids listening in the car or something, like we'd love to talk with you about it. We don't want to delay or make it feel like it has to be some special weird marker before it's allowed. It's like you said, it's a response to genuine conversion and desire. And if a kid wants that and is like, I follow Jesus, and well, that's what He calls me to do, I want to do that. Like, we want to walk with you through that, and parents walk with you and talk with you about how you feel and navigate your conscience on that. But it's something that it's just awesome to celebrate. You don't have to wait until you're a grown up to get baptized. I'll just say that.
That's right. Yeah. There are certain places and churches and pastors that we know that, they've reasoned in their own hearts and have decided that no one under 18 in their churches can get baptized. And I think that's a faulty theological position. Mm-hmm. If a parent and a child want to make that decision together before the Lord with the counsel of their pastors, okay. Yeah. But as a mandate, a sweeping mandate, I don't find that to be biblical.
For sure. Yeah. The what it protects is, the fear of it being a coercion thing and it not being legitimate. That's right. But also, and so the part of that for parents is good. Like, hey, it's not any kind of a credit to you and your parenting, or something that sort of builds you up to have your kids get baptized. Like, you want it to be legitimate. You want it to be their desire. And even if it's a good thing, you want to encourage them. And it's like, don't feel like it reflects poorly on you if you haven't had your kids been baptized and other parents have at younger age, at their kids at a younger age or whatever. Like, and there can be a weird comparison thing, or just like, oh, I want to do the right thing and this is what they're supposed to do. And it's like, it's okay. Like it's better for them to desire. You can teach about it, talk about it, but for your kids to desire that and genuinely follow Jesus and then want to obey in that way, like, it's so much more beautiful than feeling like you got to check boxes or meet some standard of whatever background you came from or whatever. So all right, next question. We'll probably camp up here for a while. There's a lot of good stuff here. Question says, we need to submit to good authority, but how would you define good authority? Obviously there's no perfect king other than Jesus. Does that mean that I'm not obligated to honor worldly authorities?
Dun dun dun. Mm-hmm. Sooner or later it's going to come up. That's a great question. And I knew the second I said that in my sermon that question would come in, and I was already thinking of how I'd answer that. So that's good. And in God's providence, that we're recording this on Tuesday. On Monday, I was able to go to a little luncheon with a guy by the name of Jonathan Lehman, who works for a ministry called Nine Marks, and he just released a book called Authority. And he's got a master's in political science from, I think, Georgetown is what he said, and a PhD in political theology and stuff. So he's got certain expertise, and he lives in Capitol Hill, by the way. So he's got experience as well. So it was really cool being able to kind of sit under his teaching for a couple of hours while it's been something that, I mean, we've all wrestled through, particularly since COVID, depending on what state you lived in and how you view authority. And so I just want to rattle through some of the notes that I took from his teaching, and some stuff that I've already been wrestling through. So obviously, maybe a disclaimer as well is we live in a world like where semantics is a really big deal. And what I mean by that is people are frequently defining and redefining words and even co-opting words that were previously used in different ways, and now all of a sudden we're gonna redefine what this thing means. And so with something like authority, the way I think semantics have come into play is that we've turned it from an objective reality into a subjective reality. Even kind of the way that question is asked and formed is like, how does this matter for me versus like, how did God design the world? And authority, even in the very nature of that word, comes from the author, who is God, authority. And he gives us dominion, as I talked about Sunday, or he authorizes us to have authority over the world. And so when you look at Scripture, there's only 5 different categories where authority comes into play and the different ways that authority is used. So you have the church as an institution, and the church has keys to the kingdom to bind and loose what is in heaven and on earth. You have the home, where the parents have authority over their kids. You have the marriage, where in our theology, the husband is the head of the household and he leads with sacrifice. You have the state, and they have the sword. And then you have elders who rule the church through the word and wash the church with the word. And so when we think about good and bad authority in those different categories, in being made in the image of God, the best authority, good authority, causes flourishing in life, because God always causes flourishing in life. The opposite, bad authority, causes harm and death. And so, again, we get into semantics here because people hear that and they're like, okay, well, what's harm? And in a very fragile, trigger-happy world, harm, as an example, we've heard this, is a boss holding their employee accountable to do their job. You're harming me. No, that's not harm. That's just accountability. And we've conflated actual abuse and domineering leadership with just good, direct authority over people. And so when we're thinking about like what causes life and flourishing, and then we think about, okay, those 5 different categories, church, home, marriage, state, and elders, think about their jurisdictions. What do they oversee? What has God given them to oversee? And so a very easy example of that is a parent. If you choose to put your kid in a school, you have primary authority over your child in that jurisdiction. But the second you check your child into school, you have now put them in submission to the school's jurisdiction. And we all freak out about that. Like, no, that's bad. And the easy example, again, there is to say, like, okay, yes, that authority can be used poorly. Like, for example, if your child is a boy and wants to be referred to as a girl with a girl name, and the schools cut you out of that,
right,
that is a bad use of authority because they are overstepping their jurisdiction. However, what if that child, God forbid, is abused in their home? And when they're handed over to the school and they're in the school's authority, that's the one safe place they have for them. That's good. That's good for the child. And so we have to think about jurisdictions as well and the overlap that things have. And then we have to think, what is the extent of their jurisdiction? And I know I'm rambling here a little bit, but I think this is helpful in kind of setting all of this up. Because what tends to happen, and this happens primarily with the state, is the state begins to overstep their jurisdiction. If you look at the scriptures, the two primary places that the state should have authority, that God sets the kings in their places, we're called to submit to them, honor them, and pray for them, is in the financial well-being and the physical well-being of their people. They are not to oversee the spiritual well-being of their people, which is why we have the separation of church and state. They're not to oversee other aspects of our well-being. And then we take that into the church, and here's what happens. Pastors, our authority, our jurisdiction is in prayer, presence, and preaching, primarily. We lead, feed, guide, and protect the flock. And then here's what happens. We sit down to counsel people, and they want us to tell them, how should I vote? Mm-hmm. And we say, that's not my jurisdiction. We should say that. We can help people think theologically about life and godliness and everything pertaining to that, but it is not a pastor's authority to tell people, this is how you should vote. This is how you should do things when it pertains to current world events. And I actually think pastors, in the last 4 or 5 years, there's a couple of local ones that they have overstepped their jurisdiction, and they've made all of our jobs much harder.
Yeah.
Because they have willingly overstepped their jurisdictions and where God has given us our authority. It is to rule the church through prayer, presence, and preaching with the word and what the word speaks. And so then the question is, how do we define what's good there? Well, I think there's some classic markers that we need to look to the fruit of that particular authority, whether it be in a home, in a marriage, in the state, and whatever else, and we just determine, okay, is this good or bad? I think there's ideas of, I wrote some of these things down. Is this authority willingly submitting to a higher authority? Because we all should be willing to submit to a higher authority. If you cannot submit, you cannot have authority. And that's the whole point of what I was saying Sunday, is we have a submission problem, and that rolls up to God. We won't submit to God. Good authority constantly seeks wisdom. Beware of the authority that always knows every answer. Authority is neither permissive nor domineering, right? It's in that gray area. Good authority is not self-protective, but they bear the cost in a unique way. Pastors should know that. Good authority is exercised with patience and listening. And then good authority displays the fruit of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. And people made in the image of God, Christian or not, could and should display that fruit. Obviously, Christians in a unique and growing way, but a person who's not a Christian can and should be gentle, should have patience, should have self-control, and should grow in those things, obviously not in a unique Christ-like way. And so, again, we have to be able to determine what jurisdiction am I under? Is this authority good? Is it bearing fruit of the Spirit? And then, honestly, the Bible is clear with us. Even sometimes there is bad authority that God has still placed over us, and we are called to bear with that in a unique way, like Christ bore suffering in a unique and in an unjust way. Mm-hmm. And we, as Christians, we say, this is not my home.
Yeah,
I'm going to bear with this for now. But if it's something, the two areas where disobedience is okay, as I've heard it, and I agree with this, is if the authority in your life is commanding you to do something that God explicitly forbids you to do, don't do that thing. So the example there is Queen Jezebel telling Elijah, you have to worship Baal, worship a false idol. No, don't do that. God has forbid you from worshiping idols, disobey. And then on the other end, if the government is forbidding you to do something that God explicitly commands you to do. So Daniel praying in Babylon, they forbid him from doing that. He disobeyed that. Now, we have to be careful in determining what has God explicitly commanded me to do and how does that look. Because everyone is going to be like, whoa, we church and COVID and opening. And I'm not mocking anyone. I wrestled with that a lot. But for a short time when we didn't know things, we didn't have data and whatnot, it would have been foolish to gather in person. And anyone, like, hindsight is 20/20. Everyone that's standing on their moral high ground, like, I knew. Like, come on, get out of here with that.
Yeah.
You didn't. But that being said, God commands us to gather, to preach, to baptize, to fellowship, to pray, and to take communion. How that looks and the forms it takes has changed over centuries. Mm-hmm. It just has. And in that particular season, we made the decision that we thought was best in that time. And hopefully that doesn't happen again. Mm-hmm. So anyways, again, I just did a ton of talking. And we'll continue to talk about this stuff throughout the rest of the year.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I can skip over some things that I was going to say because, I mean, those highlights, I think scripture-wise for people, Romans 13, Titus 3:1, and 1 Peter chapter 2, which happened to me in my devotions yesterday, which was providential.
Yeah.
And just getting in that and this idea specifically that God's put human institutions over us.
Yep.
It says whether it's the emperor supreme or governors, it kind of goes through the list and calls us to obey and submit to those authorities. And then it goes even further and says that, servants are to be subject to their masters, not only to the good and gentle, but also the unjust. It says this, for this is a gracious thing. When mindful of God, one endures sorrows while suffering unjustly. And then it goes on to show how Jesus did that and he modeled that for us. And so, I think the real question here is less about like what's good authority and bad authority, because I think that's sometimes us looking for loopholes of like, what excuses can I use to disobey authority or to invalidate it or, take the authority away, basically. And I think what we're trying to do ultimately there is compartmentalize submission and surrender, which is a holistic command God's given to us. And that's why these verses clearly state, hey, even bad authorities over you, God's put them there, and you're to submit to them, obviously outside of when they're telling you to disobey God in one way or another. I think it's less about like, how do we decide what we're going to follow and not follow? But it's really, do we see our life in our experiences on earth through the lens of representing Christ and enduring suffering for him? Or do we expect ease, comfort, and safety? But even more so, especially in America, power and prominence because we're Christians, because that is just simply the opposite of what Jesus promised us. Not he warned, not a maybe this might happen. He promised his followers that they will be killed for him. They will suffer for his name. They'll be rejected by family. But just not great things. Yeah. A lot of beautiful promises in Scripture, and not some great promises there. And that ultimately, as we're in this season of Easter, Jesus did the opposite of what his people wanted him to do. They wanted what I think, candidly, a lot of times in America we want, which is like, we want Christians to be prominent again. Mm-hmm. We want to have power and influence. We don't want to be under anyone's thumb. Like that's what the Jews wanted. They wanted Jesus to come and to push back governing authorities and to give them cultural and governing prominence and power again. And Jesus didn't do that. Mm-hmm. He came and did the opposite. He laid down his life. He came to serve and to sacrifice. And Jesus spent most of his time, he dealt with authority a lot, establishing his own authority. And the authority that Jesus sought to overthrow and to discredit was false religious authority that had its thumb over people and was wrong and unjust. Like Jesus spent so much of his time dealing with the problem authority, and it was religious authority that was not gospel, that was just evil and power hungry and prideful and wicked. And so I think the root issue here, as I've thought about this, is I think that Christianity and autonomy are incompatible. And our entire lives as believers, they fall under this banner of surrender. Following Jesus is a surrender of our lives, our past, our futures. It's a surrender of our finances, our family, our money, our comfort, our well-being. We're entrusting all of that to him. We're surrendering it to him. We're giving up of ourselves and giving him everything. Like that's the fullness of what it looks like. And then taking on his purposes, the identity he gives us, his truth, not our truth, not anyone else's truth, the ultimate truth and his truth. And so I think there's a couple of reasons, just to, in case anyone's not convinced of that like, no, I think I can have like autonomy in life and still, surrender to him. Like we can't be autonomous because we need community and friendship. We are not capable of knowing what to do, seeing ourselves rightly, and walking through life faithfully on our own. We're just not. We need church. We need relationships. We need other people in our lives. We need accountability and support. We need people to call us out when we're in sin, when we have blind spots, and we need support. We're not strong. We need other people to lift us up, to bear with our burdens. We need direction and correction. We need people to tell us. We need God's word primarily, but we need pastors, we need friends, we need leaders in life to tell us where we should be going, and then to correct us when we're off course, when we're off track. Yeah. We need wisdom and counsel. We don't have inherent intuitive knowledge on what to do in all circumstances, especially when things aren't black and white and when it's not really clear and simple and easy. We need that. We need something outside of ourselves. And then ultimately just foundational truth and humility. We cannot know what's right and what's true and see everything. We think we do. We have like a packaged sort of sense of whether it's theology or our worldview or just a summation of our upbringing and experiences. We think we know, kind of have our ducks in a row, but we don't know what's true. We don't have that within us. We have broken pieces of God's design in every human being of justice and what's right and wrong. But the fullness of that comes from outside of ourselves. And ultimately we're sinful. And so we can't be autonomous because we are inherently broken. And even though saved and transformed, there is brokenness within us that distorts us, that distracts us. And then finally, there is the reality of spiritual warfare and of the evil one seeking to distract us, to get us off track, to tell us lies, to tell us to listen to the wrong things. And so there's all these things in life that we need, things that we need to be careful about, and then things that we don't have. And autonomy, the idea of autonomy, it goes beyond just the church world, because it's like you said, it's the presumption that somehow we're good. We don't need anyone else to tell us what's right or wrong, how to live, that we can really what we're saying when we reject authority is, I am trustworthy and stable, and I don't need anything or anyone else. I will be fine. And that is a fundamentally unchristian reality and thought, because the entire foundation of our faith is that we were dead in our sin, and that everything about us is fallible and imperfect, weak, and not capable and not awesome. And that's why Jesus came to save us. And that reality is still true in the world in different ways. God's design for the world, however broken it is in various times in history and in every country, it's not like, any earthly governmental system is perfect, but God's design for structure and for authority is to hem us in, to bring justice. And again, there's brokenness in how this is not done well all the time because humans are involved, but it is God's way of doing that. And so, I think that's the thing we really have to grapple with, is especially as Americans, because again, this is like a universal issue. I feel this, like I don't want to submit to every authority. I think I know what's best. My intuition, my perspective, like that's just our default. We think we know what's right and wrong, and we get frustrated when any level of authority, whether it's a parent, a teacher, a boss, a governing authority, or a church authority, we disagree with, or we think it's stupid, we don't agree, we don't understand, or it just rubs us the wrong way, or it's a convictional thing even. We're like, no, this is the way it should be. I think you just have to be really careful. Like you said, where we make those distinctions of like, this is bad authority because I don't like it, because I don't agree with it, because it's politically not, where I'm at or whatever, versus like actual gospel issues of like, this is a crisis of obedience to God, of like, I'm being asked to spit on my Bible and disobey God. Right. And I'm having to decide willingly to say, no, I will follow God instead and take the consequences for it. Or refuse, or do the right thing and know that people will hate you for it. And like, I just think that happens so infrequently most of the time for us. And like you said, we make other smaller things elevated to this essentials of the faith gospel level issue. And then those become ways that we exempt ourselves from authority, because we're like, well, I'm going to do this because I think it's best, or that's stupid, or they're dumb. And it's like, we just don't, that Bible just doesn't give us the exception to live that way. We have to take this seriously, because candidly, it's a lot easier to say I won't follow that authority over trivial things. It's a lot harder to say I won't follow that authority when it's legitimate. Yeah. And it's not easier when it's real and our faith is on the line and our commitment to the Lord is on the line. That's actually when it's really hard, because it's just not trivial in that time. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's good, and that's why the complexity of Scripture is so beautiful, because like Scripture helps us interpret Scripture. And so the reason why I bring that up is like weighing that 1 Peter 2 passage about slaves submitting to their masters, like also like weighing that against 1 Corinthians 7, where if you're a slave that can be free, you should get your freedom. You should purchase your freedom. Obviously, there's a massive difference between what slavery was in the Bible versus slavery, the transatlantic slave. What we know as slavery. It was indentured servitude. So if you can pay it off and go be free. Like that's not your lot in life. So neither one of us would look at a North Korean Christian and say, don't leave North Korea. Just submit.
Yeah.
That's stupid. That's unwise. We would help them purchase their freedom, so to speak, get them free so they can freely worship Jesus. And then we have to also, I think the scripture gives us scopes for what submission looks like. The limits of submission, maybe is the way to say that, of when you're a kid, you obey your parents. Whatever they say, you do, obviously, unless it's violating Christian conscience. When you're an adult, you honor your parents. That's what your submission looks like. You are not, my parents can't call me and tell me do this. They try to, but I'm called to honor them and respect them. So depending on what authority we're looking at, so we're complementarian. We believe that the husband is the head of the home, but that doesn't mean the husband gets to look at a wife and say, I command you.
Right.
You don't get commanding enforcement authority over your wife. You serve, you lay your life down, you sacrifice, and you create a home that is so full of vitality that your wife willingly says, man, that guy is so much like Jesus. I want to follow him. And there's a mutual submission that happens in a marriage. And so we are not looking at out there and saying man, if you're a wife in a home where your husband's abusing you in some way, just submit.
Yeah.
The Bible is so much more complex and nuanced than just submit.
Yeah.
And so those are different categories of limits of submission. I think where that gets complex is when we're Christians living in a nation that's governed by non-Christians. And so again, we go to scripture. God puts them in their place. What does it look like? We honor the governor. We pray for peace. We pray for the president by name. And then we as Americans should absolutely thank God we live in a democratic society where we can picket, we have freedom of speech, where we can sign things to try and get someone impeached. We have the things written into our Constitution to be able to quote unquote revolt, which sounds like a harsh word, but to raise things up the flagpole to say, I don't want to be under that authority, but I'm going to do this in a way that is designed.
Yeah.
I'm not just going to go out there and assassinate the president.
What it looks like to submit to authority in America because of all the things that you just mentioned is different than what it looks like a Christian in China meeting in an underground church submitting to authority. It's just a different situation. That's why
it is
this, the desire to want to know, tell me how to vote, or tell me, it's more complicated than that, because we can't be prescriptive and say for all Christians everywhere, forever, all the time, this is how it works. There's a lot of convictional time in the word and in prayer to discern, God, help lead me in the way that I can honor you and submit to you, and your word tells me to, and honor and submit to the authorities, but also be someone who fights for justice and works within what I have to work with in ways that are holy. And then I can stand before the Lord with a good conscience.
Yep.
That's a very complex thing, and that's why you don't hear us saying, hey, here's how you should vote, or here's how you should think about this issue, because it's more complicated than that, and we're not going to try to blast, as many current pastors do, everyone on one side of an issue and say you're all wrong, or you're all not following the Lord faithfully because you don't see things a certain way. It's just, that's not how this works.
Yeah.
And we need to go to the Lord and go to his word and say, God, help me reason through this and help me in good conscience obey you and follow you in these things.
Yep. And I think there's a vast difference between the authority of command and the authority of counsel. And what I mean by that is, for one of us to get up there on a Sunday and say, thou shalt vote this way in 2024, that's a command, versus I would gladly sit down with anyone in our church and counsel and think through and not even come to a conclusion where I'll even say, you should do this or not do this, but just say, here's the issues at play.
Yeah.
Here's the character at play. Here's the way I'm praying. Here's the way I'm thinking. How are you thinking? Let me ask you some questions. Like this counsel relationship. And like you said earlier, we should be doing that in community anyways.
Right.
Because none of us knows the right answer all the time.
Yeah.
And we need to open ourselves up to be wrong a little more often. I mean, just think about like Dietrich Bonhoeffer, theologian in Germany, fled for a while in Haarlem, spent some time in Harlem, New York, got around a lot of African-American Christians, saw what they were facing in pre-civil rights America, and thought, oh my gosh, that's what the Jews back in my homeland are facing right now. I'm going to go back there, and I'm going to plot to assassinate Hitler. That is
wild.
Ultimate revolt and
Yeah.
civil disobedience. And I think he was right. Genesis 9:6. And so anyways, but like we're not in that circumstance.
Yeah.
Despite what the media wants you to believe about what so-and-so president is, and they're always the next iteration of Hitler, you know, and it's just like, get out of here with that. Like, we live in a democratic society,
Yeah.
and maybe shreds of that are deteriorating and whatever else. But again, as a Christian, my great hope is not in democracy. I love democracy. I never want it to go away. I want to restore true forms of that. In the United States, I'd love to see that happen. But what I will say is two things. Under persecution is when the church grows the most. I mean, it's true right now in China. The latest estimate is 100 million Christians in the persecuted church in China, all over the global south, all over the 1040 window there in the Middle East, where the persecuted church is growing the most. That's not me saying, man, I want to be persecuted.
Yeah.
Because I don't.
No.
But I do want the church in America to grow. So I'd say that's one thing. I think a second way that maybe we as Christians can go about this is get yourself in public spheres and participate. Be a Christian in public spaces. We have in our church nurses, doctors, police officers, firefighters, teachers, government officials, people who work in city council, like public spheres. That it's just like, you know what, I'm gonna do what I can to see Christ be like His love bear on this place, and like, don't hear me saying like we enact Christian law in those places. What I am saying is you be a Christ follower in a compelling way in those places, and like watch God change things.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah. The gospel that we believe is the same gospel that the early church believed, and it's the same gospel that the disciples believed and taught. And it has to be true for all of us.
Yep.
The same gospel that the church that was being tortured and impaled on poles and burnt at the stake and having heads cut off and, you know, hung on a cross upside down, boiled to death, stoned to death, the same gospel that was true for them, and the same reality about our citizenship being in heaven and about us submitting to the Lord and enduring hardship for His glory, it has to be true for us now. And so it's hard for us not forget, you know, just comparing country to country realities, but it's really hard for us not to only see the gospel and see God's word through the lens of our current circumstances in our life, and to interpret everything through as though it's written to modern day Americans. It wasn't. And so we have to do that's why this is complicated. We have to do constant work to go back and say, how is this true for them when it was written to them? How do we translate that to us now? And say, okay, well, how does it bear on our reality? Because it's not just an ancient text written to an ancient people that we only think about in those terms, but we can't separate it from the audience that these books were written to, the churches dealing with what they were dealing with, that received these letters, and then just come and just only look at it as though this is a letter Paul sent to modern day Americans, because it just isn't. Like, that's why this is hard. That's why voting should be hard. That's why convictional issues on all of these things. I can't even imagine like some of our teachers and what they may either now deal with or may deal with in the future. Pronouns and things being asked of them by parents or by their principals or districts or whatever, like wrestling through, how do I be a Christian in these circumstances, and what does that actually look like? It's hard. It's not simple. It's not easy. In some ways, it's easier under persecution because it's really clear. You're outright being rejected by everyone around you, and you're being killed for Jesus. that's terrible, and I don't want that. But it's more cut and dry. It's messy now, and so it's okay that this is hard. It should be. There's tension involved.
Right.
There's a lot of hard work involved, and I just, my admonition to everyone would be, and to myself, is just to not be lazy and cut corners, and just make this simple and try to make it black and white, because it's just not.
Yeah.
And both in how we decide and how we seek God's wisdom in what we should do, but also in how we treat one another. When there is charitable disagreement and genuine convictional disagreement on how we handle ourselves in the world and how we deal with these things in faith, from study of God's word and in submission to him, it's hard. It's messy. And so, I think I just have a couple outputs I want to share before we close out from all of this, that I think, to make this practical and not just make it feel like, whoa, how does this even work then? This is messy. This is too big. We're not trying to create ambiguity around this, but these are some clear things from God's word that we can practice. One is to pray for your leaders at all levels. Pray for your pastors, pray for your kids' teachers, pray for your boss, pray for leadership in your work, pray for governing authorities. Two would be to endure suffering and injustice like Christ and for Christ. And as 1 Peter 3 says, to not repay evil for evil, in that there is a sense in which that's promised to us, and in some degree we will. And when that happens, our response shouldn't be to just revolt against it and be angry and be like, this isn't fair, and go, oh, this is actually promised, if it's genuinely for your faith and for your obedience to Christ. Three is to pray for where we live, whether it's the city, your state, or the wider culture. Jeremiah 29:7 says to seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its welfare you will find your welfare. For those that were actually in exile in a place that is not their home, in a terrible situation, regardless of what the future held and with their desire to be out of that exile, God said, hey, pray for that. I mean, we should be praying for more than we're angry at our leaders and our culture. Obviously, to obey authority where God calls us to just do what's right. Don't look for excuses or reasons to skirt authority because you don't like it. That's just not. That's a totally different thing than everything we've just discussed about wrestling through convictions and wanting to obey the Lord. I don't like it. It's dumb. Is not a reason to, or it's not fair. That's not an excuse that we have. We honor Jesus and honor God when we submit to authority. And then hold fast to the gospel, no matter what. Like, that's the litmus test for us for when we should disobey earthly authority, because we always choose to obey God's authority, and we have to be serious about the Acts 5. The disciples are told, stop preaching the gospel. I don't know what you guys are teaching. And they're like, we surrender to Jesus, we serve Jesus, and we're going to preach the gospel. That should be our litmus test. We should be serious about that. And then just two more. This isn't going on forever, I promise.
You're good.
Consider how you live life as a representative of Christ. 1 Corinthians 9 has been helpful for me here. This idea of, in order to win more, you become all things to all people for the sake of the gospel. This isn't become a chameleon. This isn't change your ethics and morals, but there is sometimes living as a representative of Christ does mean suffering for Christ and being rejected for truth, for obedience, and for who we represent. But sometimes it does mean being a servant to all, going to all, meeting people where they are, and trying to reach people, not by compromising our faith or our morals, but by being in this world and not being of it, and having that tension there. So remember that. It's not always being rejected and suffering. That's largely, we see that in Scripture a lot, but it does mean considering how you might reach lost people by getting outside of your comfort zone in different ways, and not always worrying about everything being exactly how you want it to be and making it black and white. And then lastly, as we mentioned, remember your home, your citizenship, your identity, and your destination in heaven. That's protected. Nothing that happens on this earth, in this country, wars, who knows? Nations will rise and fall, and nothing will change what God has done for you and in the home that you have with him forever. And so, as 2 Corinthians 5 says, we have to have good courage and walk in faith. Or Hebrews 11, I love the desire a better homeland, to actually be longing for that, not just for relief from pain and suffering, but I often find myself realizing how little I actually think about and long for eternity and long for that home. I want things to change now. I want justice now. I want fixes now. I want healing now in myself and in the world. And that's good. But I think we should long more for that homeland, that shades and colors and changes how we feel about what we experience, the injustice that we see or experience in our own lives, and whether or not we're really trying to build something here for now or we're building something for eternity. It changes everything when we see it that way.
Yeah, that's good. The only thing I would add is we're obviously stepping into a season where who our governing authority may or may not change, and there's going to be laws that may or may not be enacted, and things that are decreed that we as tax-paying, voting citizens are a part of, and we call this land home. In our church, there will be a variety of viewpoints on those things. And so what I would say is lead with charity, and then be really careful anytime the phrase, and I have to be careful of this, in my heart, head, or mouth comes out that says, you can't be a Christian and. Because we've been in Galatians for 12 weeks, and Galatians, if it is not smacking us in the face with a Christian is by grace alone, through faith alone, in Christ alone, to the glory of God alone, justified by the work of Jesus, not any of these other peripheral things. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
That's the entire test. Be really careful with declaring someone's salvation based upon how they view something. So have charity, be careful there. And then have a dialogue.
Yeah.
Don't assign motive. Don't play the caricature game. Don't play the speculation game. Go to Hamilton, sit down with someone and say, I view this differently than you. Why is that? Like, how different would things go if we could actually have that conversation instead of just assigning all of those things and speculating and declaring someone's not saved because they view something that's not salvific differently than you. And furthermore, don't email me and say, so-and-so believes this, I believe this. Tell them why they're wrong and I'm right. That's not my job. I will sit down with the three of you and we'll sit and talk and we'll weigh the scriptures and theology and, again, think theologically about all of life, because that we should be doing that. But I would just say, like, we're stepping into the season, and so we need to be aware of those things and be careful in declaring salvation over people. That is God's job. So anyways, that's my
mic drop. That's awesome. So good. Yeah, we're heading into that season. There's some things that we're praying about and looking toward as far as how we can, whether through this podcast or other means as a church, just walk together through this. And we know it's happening. We see it. We're not avoiding it. The church's goal and purpose is not to direct us through politics, but it is our responsibility to steward God's word and truth and to walk rightly in this world together and to help each other do that. And so, as pastors, we want to help you do that. We're going to walk with you through these things. Yeah.
I mean, think about how silly this sounds. I mean, just, I got to do it again because we're going to roll over time. I don't care.
Roll over.
Happy story. Like, if I sit and say, I'm a charismatic, a cessationist can't be a Christian. Like, that sounds so silly. I'm a complementarian, an egalitarian can't be a Christian. I baptize after salvation. They baptize infants. They can't be a Christian. Like, we sit there and we're like, well, that's so silly. Insert latest, like, I'm vaccinated, they're not. They can't be a Christian, or the inverse. Like, guys, let's get there. It's not a salvation issue. It is a conviction issue. It is a wrestle together and have charity issue. So anyways, I will close out with this. Favorite, we're going to jam 4 of them into one.
Oh, man.
And they're all time chronology related. Favorite month, favorite holiday, favorite season of the year, and favorite time of the day. So, I mean, just like big to small.
I had to type that out just to make sure my brain can take it.
Favorite month, favorite holiday, favorite season, favorite time of day, and maybe a one sentence why. Okay.
Month, I would say probably... And month and holiday are just overlap for me. Like, I love Christmas.
Yeah.
And I love that time of year. It's just fun and family. And I love singing together as a church. I love celebrating the birth of Christ, and just good memories there. Like that's just a special, super special time of the year. And I like you separating these out because I don't love winter. That's not my favorite season of the year. I definitely like spring. Spring's awesome. I love when it's not crazy hot, but it's just beautiful outside, and you can. I do not like the allergies, and that is miserable right now.
Yeah, it is.
But I love the weather of spring.
Yeah.
That's awesome. It's just a beautiful season. Time of day, man, this has changed a lot over the years from my stupid, idiotic college days to my old man, bald, working out, waking up early fatherhood days that I find myself in now. But I love early morning is the best. Like waking up at 5 a.m., I know some people will probably hear that and just cringe so hard. It's awesome.
Yeah.
You just get up, read your Bible, work out, get to talk with your spouse. You get to, do whatever. You get to just like get stuff done, get set for the day, and doing that consistent. I'm crazy. I do it on vacation. I do it on Saturday. I don't care what day it is. I need that same thing. Get up super early. Give me that discipline. Give me that rhythm of life on vacation. I'm a nut job now.
Yeah.
I work out at CrossFit gyms on vacation. I go find them somewhere, and I'm like, you know what? Whatever. 5:30 class, done.
Yeah.
That's what I'm doing because I just I love what that does for my day of just getting up and spending time in the Word. A discipline of all kinds, of spiritual, physical, both in getting up early, working out, reading, just sitting in some silence.
Yeah.
Just it sets the tone for the day. But especially as a dad now, it's like having that quiet, having that space where there's just like, and you can get all that stuff done and have just good conversation with Allison. We both wake up at the same time every day now, and no matter what's going on. And so anyway, that has become my jam.
Love it.
I didn't expect to be so excited to talk about the time of the day, but I am.
It happens every day.
That it does.
Oh man, I go December, favorite month. It's my birthday and Jesus' birthday and New Year's Eve and soups and all the good things. Hot coffee hits different in cold weather.
Oh yeah.
Like it's just a fun month, and the movies with the kids and the specialness and all those kind of things. So December, holiday would be Christmas as well. That's a given, I think. If anyone says things,
Not St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, that's right. St. Patty's. That's modalism, Patrick.
The best. What a reference.
That's it. And then season, I'm going to choose fall because you get to break out the jacket for the first time, but just in the morning, and then it heats up, and then what fall represents on the sports calendar is the World Series, football,
yes.
NCAA football. There's just all kinds of cool stuff happening, and then it's a fun season in the life of the church because we go all summer of just kind of like sporadic vacations, fractured nature of what summer looks like, and then fall is like, oh, we have some stability and steam, and we're here together every week, and it's just fun.
And you're almost winning me over to fall, man.
I love
that was
fall.
quite the expose on fall.
I love fall, and I mean, we live in an area that doesn't really experience like a traditional fall either, which is
kind of extended summer.
Yeah, and then time of day, I love sunrise as well. Yeah. It's just fun. It's quiet, and then I try to where we live, we get. I mean, I've lived in a few different places. We get the most beautiful sunrises.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's just not even... It's on In-N-Out's T-shirts. I mean, come on. Like, we get the most beautiful sunrises and sunsets. And anywhere we go on vacation, I try to make sure I see at least one sunrise and compare it against a California sunrise. And I'm a very proud Californian. So
Southern California morning temperature.
It's the best.
Oh, man.
It's the best. I work out in the garage. You open it up. You get that airflow. And it's like... crisp, and I'm sweating, and it's this weird experience, and I love it.
Just that crisp sweat. And then I follow with a cold plunge and then a steam shower. And then you smoke a brisket in your backyard.
That's it. And my body is sitting there just like, what are you doing to me? And I'm beating you into submission is what I'm doing.
That's right. Oh, awesome. Great question. All right. Well, keep sending us your questions. Again, if something comes to your mind later in the week about something, if we get a ton of questions about the passage, we're really going to focus in there. Sometimes we'll have time to answer something that's not directly related. And we're saving all of the extra ones for some special stuff we may do in the future with the podcast. But excited to celebrate Easter this weekend. We got our Good Friday service this week, Friday, obviously, at 6:30. And then we got 2 Easter services, 8:30 and 10. So I encourage you to join us there, invite your friends, and let's celebrate the death and resurrection of Jesus together this weekend. It's going to be a sweet time. We're looking forward to it. So we will see you next week, and we'll see you on Sunday, hopefully, and Friday.
Hoo-ah, cowboy.
Bye.